My name is Walter Kent, and I'm 61 years old. For the last 26 years, I oversaw the production floor at Wexler Components, a third-generation family business in Akron, Ohio. I was never the type who needed attention or recognition. I wasn't out front making speeches, shaking hands at expos, or chasing headlines. My role was making sure the machines kept running, shipments left on time, and the workforce remained steady and loyal. Reliability, that was my currency. And for Harold Wexler, the founder who built the company from scratch, that was more than enough. He once told me, "Walter, when you're in charge, I sleep easier." Those words carried weight. They meant everything to me. So you can imagine my shock when, just 5 weeks after Harold stepped down because of health issues, I was summoned to a conference room by his son, Connor. He was 33, brimming with ambition, fueled by buzzwords, and barely 5 months into his reign as CEO. From the moment I stepped inside, I knew this wasn't going to be a friendly check-in. He didn't offer me a seat, didn't even glance up from his laptop at first. Then he leaned back, fingers locked behind his head, and said, "We need to modernize, Walter. Streamline. You get it, right? We just can't have people stuck in the past slowing things down." It was corporate jargon dressed up as strategy. No handshake. No thanks. Not even a mention of my 26 years of loyalty. Just a dismissal, delivered as casually as if he were letting go of a part-time barista. I didn't fight it. I didn't plead. I simply nodded once and told him, "You'll have my badge by noon." He smiled, thinking that was the end of the matter, but it wasn't, not even close. Have you ever been blindsided by someone who had no idea of the value you actually bring? If you have, you know the feeling. And sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's just the beginning of the storm. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the same wood grain where I'd eaten breakfast for 23 years. My wife, Alice, had passed away 5 years earlier, and since then, that table had become both my office and my place of comfort. I reached for an old accordion folder, labeled WK Employment from the filing cabinet, and started flipping through nearly 3 decades of paperwork. That's when I stumbled across something, buried in a 2008 contract amendment, written in plain, unmistakable legal language. It was something Connor, in his rush to streamline, had clearly never bothered to read. In the event of termination not explicitly documented as for cause, the employee shall be entitled to severance equal to 24 months of current base salary, in addition to accrued retirement contributions, stock options, and performance bonuses based on the 5 most recent fiscal years. I couldn't help but laugh. Harold had pushed for that clause years ago when the company flirted with private equity, determined to keep me secure through uncertain times. If they ever try to shove you out, he'd told me, they'll have to pay you what you're worth. Back then, I thought it was unnecessary. But now it was my armor, my sword and shield. I picked up the phone and called Martin Blake, a sharp labor attorney I'd come to know back when Alice was diagnosed. He read the clause, then burst out laughing. "Walter, this is gold. You could walk into mediation tomorrow and walk out with a settlement check that starts with 3. I asked Martin to move forward with the paperwork. 3 days later, Wexler Components received an official letter. It was precise, professional, and free of threats. Just a clear reminder of the contract terms Connor had inherited but never cared to understand. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. Sometimes protecting your future doesn't look like revenge. It looks like being ready. If you've ever discovered strength in a forgotten clause or a small overlooked detail, you know exactly what I mean. By the time Wexler's legal team responded, it was already too late. Their reply was flimsy, evasive, clearly written in the hope that I couldn't decipher fine print. But Martin had already filed with the county court. Now, it wasn't just about severance. It had expanded into age discrimination, breach of contract, and wrongful termination. Exactly the kind of case no company wants splashed across the local news. 2 days later, Connor called me directly. "Walter, this is all a misunderstanding," he said, his voice strained. "We can give you 6 months severance and a strong reference letter." I nearly laughed, but instead kept my composure. "Connor, go back and read section 11.4. I'm not asking for favors. I'm demanding what I'm owed. That's when his tone shifted. You'll never work in this industry again, he snapped. No one's interested in a bitter old man stirring up lawsuits. I stayed calm. Funny, I told him. I've already got offers. Two, actually. One from a competitor I've beaten for years, and another from a startup run by one of my former apprentices. When you lead with honesty and don't burn bridges, people remember. 2 weeks later, the case was quietly settled out of court. I walked away with full severance, back retirement contributions, and even a written apology I hadn't requested. But the real satisfaction came later. First, I heard 2 senior engineers resigned, both blaming Connor's leadership. Then came production setbacks. Then a major contract slipped through their fingers. And finally, whispers that the board had started questioning Connor's judgment. I didn't cheer. I didn't brag. The truth is, I hadn't engineered their downfall. I'd only stood firm. Their unraveling began the moment they decided experience was disposable. 6 months later, I stepped through the doors of Anchor Dynamics, a new company launched by 3 former Wexler engineers. I wasn't there seeking a position. I was there as a partner. Quiet at first, but as the projects grew, so did my role. And when we secured the logistics contract that Wexler had lost, I was the one who signed the agreement. Connor never reached out again. As for Harold, he never said he was sorry. But at Christmas, I received a card. And signed, but with one simple line in his familiar block handwriting. Thank you for never raising your voice. Have you ever been treated like you were disposable, only to return stronger than ever? Share your story in the comments. We're building something better here. Subscribe for more stories of dignity, justice, and overdue redemption. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is proving you can't be replaced.